In today's episode, I'll talk about two interesting stories. In the first story of the day, I'll talk about the green transition that we are currently undergoing and what it really means for all of us. And in the second story of the day, I'll talk about how the upcoming Chancellor of Germany went live on television recently and said something that nobody really expected. And of course, we'll understand what this really means for Germany, the rest of the world, and of course, all of us as well. Welcome to the Daily Brief Show by Zerodha, where our aim is to cut through the noise and simplify the biggest news and stories in the financial markets in a way that is easy for all of us to understand and consume, and also one level deeper as compared to traditional news channels. I'm your host Anurag Bansal, and today is Monday, the 10th of March. Let's begin with the first story then and talk about green transition, where there is a lot of things that are going on in our country. Now, for us in the team, we first came across this idea when we read about talks about corruption allegations against the Adani Group involving solar power projects. Now, of course, nobody can really say for certain if all the allegations were true, but the claim here is that Adani bribed state governments in India to buy solar power that it had been contracted to provide. And this suggests that there was some reluctance on the part of these state governments in order to purchase that solar power in the first place. Now, people, of course, then ended up asking questions. If a project to provide green electricity has been agreed upon, why would anyone need to push or bribe someone into buying it? And not too long after that, there were reports mentioning that large amounts of renewable energy in India are not being used as they are intended to be. One report said that around 600 gigawatts of renewable energy projects have not even been connected to the electricity grid yet. Another one said that 40 gigawatts of renewable energy projects could not find any buyers at all. And if you put all of these problems together, they are not just about a few power plants lying idle. They are actually huge cracks in India's plan to move from fossil fuels like coal to cleaner energy sources like wind and solar. If renewable projects do not even get connected to the grid, they obviously cannot supply any power to any of us. And if nobody wants to buy that electricity, these companies just cannot hope to earn any money or stay afloat. So it is all a very worrying sign for India's climate goals because our country has big plans to cut down on polluting energy sources. Now, in order to understand how serious the gravity of the situation is, we'll very quickly need to understand the very basics of how electricity works. See, there are three important steps in delivering electricity to all our homes and factories. First, electricity needs to be generated, whether it is from coal, gas, solar panels, wind turbines, or anything else for that matter. Second, it needs to be moved over long distances through transmission lines. And third, there are distribution companies, which are often called DISCOMs, that deliver electricity to end users and serve as the face that you and I see when we pay our electricity bills. Now, when a country decides that it wants to switch from coal-based power to renewable energy sources, it has to change this entire system. Now, in India's case, the government wants to create 500 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by year 2030. And that means our country needs huge investments in building new power generation facilities which run on solar, wind, or other clean sources of energy. Now, these new plants also have to be able to operate day after day, which needs a lot of money and planning as well. But there is also a problem known as intermittency. See, unlike coal, where you can just burn more or less coal to control how much power you can produce at any time, the thing with solar or wind power is that it depends on natural conditions. You cannot just generate solar power at night, and wind turbines might not even turn much if the wind is not very strong. So this means that you need to store extra electricity when wind or sun conditions are good so that you can use it later when they are not. And right now, India can store around 5 gigawatts of electricity, but we actually want to store more than 60 gigawatts of electricity by 2030, which is a major leap for us. Now, the thing is, once you can generate and store enough green electricity, you also need high voltage transmission lines to carry it across our country. Solar or wind farms are usually built in places where the sun shines very strongly or the wind is very reliable. But those particular spots are not always near the main cities and factories that actually end up using this power. So that means you need a lot of new infrastructure to transmit electricity over long distances, which is a costly affair and can also take a lot longer to build than the power plants themselves. And of course, one very important thing here is to make all of this process financially sensible. See, people who build big solar or wind farms need a guaranteed demand for their power so that they know that they will earn money and will be able to pay back for their investments. In India, state level distribution companies, which are the DISCOMs, like I mentioned, play a very important role here because they are the biggest buyers of electricity. But that said, these DISCOMs are under severe financial stress right now. Electricity prices are politically sensitive, so they can't really raise the prices for everyday customers like you and I without really risking a big backlash. And as a result of this, they often end up keeping residential electricity rates low, which squeezes their profit margins and leaves them short of money. So, in theory, buying from solar or wind plants should be straightforward. But the truth is that because DISCOMs already struggle to pay for the electricity they purchase right now, including coal based power, they get even more wary of signing expensive contracts for renewable power. It is often more expensive to set up these green energy projects at first, and that cost is passed on to all of us. Discoms sometimes sign purchase agreements and then back out saying that the price is too high for them. There was a very notable example in Gujarat here where about 700 megawatts of solar tenders were cancelled because by the time things had progressed, the cost of solar powered seemed too high. So, to manage all of these challenges in a more systematic way, India has set up an organization called the Solar Energy Corporation of India, or the SECI, in 2011. Now, SECI's job is to help auction renewable projects, arrange power purchase deals, and handle other hurdles in the switch to clean energy. Later on, other organizations like NTPC, NHPC, and SJVN also joined the mission to help boost renewable power in our country. And altogether, they have had some success. India has made some progress in setting up huge solar parks such as the one at Bhadla in Rajasthan, which is known to be one of the largest of its kind anywhere across the world. But that said and done, this journey has seen plenty of hiccups. Sometimes, discoms just do not want to sign new deals because of their financial troubles. Some other times, they delay or cancel projects after everything has been auctioned, like I just mentioned. Then there are also cases where even if the SECI has chosen a company to build a project, the final sign-off takes forever because there is no buyer for that particular electricity. The same thing can happen with regulators who might step in and say that the project's costs seem too out of date, forcing a rebid here. And that was also a case with the battery storage project in Gujarat, where the price of battery technology dropped significantly during the project's long approval process. And by the time it was all ready to be signed, the regulator decided that old prices no longer made sense and they sent the project back to square one. One more very big issue here is that businesses in India pay higher electricity rates than households. See, discoms rely on these particular higher rates in order to offset the cheaper rates that they offer to everyday consumers. So the thing is, they don't really want these businesses to buy power directly from a renewable source provider. India does allow a method called open access, where large businesses can buy electricity from whoever they want, and that is often cheaper if it comes directly from a solar or wind farm. But the thing is, discoms sometimes throw in new rules or red tape for that matter in order to prevent businesses from leaving them, because losing these bigger corporate clients hits them where it hurts the most, which is their revenue. There is also the problem of building enough transmission lines so power can travel from remote solar and wind farms to places that actually require it. Constructing these lines can take 5 to 15 years thanks to land acquisition issues, government approvals, and even environmental concerns. In Rajasthan, for example, some planned lines have been delayed because they could harm the habitat of the great Indian bustard, which is a rare and endangered bird. So the reality today is that you might have a completed solar farm that is completely capable of generating electricity, but it just cannot be used effectively because there is not enough transmission capacity in our country. And even the companies that build transmission lines are facing a very difficult situation. New rules say that if a line is built, but the renewable plant that it is meant to serve is not ready, then the transmission company will be paid a reduced fee for a bit of time. And that means that these transmission businesses don't really want to take the risk of building lines too far in advance in case the solar or wind farms are delayed. And this, of course, often leads to a big mismatch where a clean power project might be finished, but there is no available line to move its electricity. And all of these points, ladies and gentlemen, highlight one key point. These are not entirely new issues caused by the rise of solar and wind power. India's electricity system already had deep-rooted challenges like underfunded DISCOMs, bureaucratic delays, and a lack of coordination between agencies that handle power generation and those who manage transmission. Now, what is happening with green energy is that these particular old problems are getting transferred to the new system, which is slowing down what could otherwise be a much faster shift to cleaner sources of power for all of us. And instead of actually promoting a few new solar or wind projects, the real solution actually lies in fixing the underlying system itself, which is the way distribution companies operates, the way bureaucracy handles approvals, and the way contracts are honored, and also the way costs are shared. With that, let's move on to the next story of the day and talk about what's happening in Germany. Friedrich Merz, who is set to become Germany's next chancellor, recently appeared on a German television program and made a statement that nobody would have expected from a leader. He said in German, and I'll try to quote him as close as possible in English. He said, "My absolute priority will be to strengthen Europe as quickly as possible so that step by step we can really achieve independence from the USA." I never thought I would have to say something like this on a television program, but after Donald Trump's statements last week at the latest, it is clear that the Americans, at least this part of the Americans, this administration, are largely indifferent to the fate of Europe. Unquote. Now, for Germany, which is the country that has relied heavily on the US for military protection and has also seen the US as its strongest ally since the end of World War II, this marks an extraordinary turn of events. Now, Merz's statement deliberately mirrors the famous pledge that was made by Mario Draghi back in 2012. Now, back then, during a severe Eurozone debt crisis called Draghi, who was the president of the European Central Bank at that time, promised he would do whatever it takes to save the euro. Now, those words are considered a key moment that helped calm all this crisis. In this new situation, Merz's words about making Europe independent from the US carry very similar weight. They suggest a new path in European politics, one where Europe starts preparing to stand on its own without always relying on American power. Now, Merz's sudden stance is also very closely linked to Donald Trump's approach to alliances. Now, see, traditionally, American presidents valued the US-Europe relationship because it was built on common principles like democracy and shared security interests. But Trump often describes alliances as unfair commercial deals that place the US at a disadvantage. And this was very clear in his statement last week, where he claimed that the European Union was formed in order to screw the United States. Most historians say that this is wrong because the original version of the EU was created in the early 1950s to prevent future wars on Europe, and it did so with strong American support. Trump also proposed placing tariffs on European imports, and when he was asked about Europe's possible reaction, he insisted that Europe would not be able to strike back in any effective way. Now, this tells European leaders that the old trust and understanding between America and Europe may be breaking down more than ever before now. And these tensions come at a very critical time. Think tanks like the Bruegel Institute have warned that if America steps away from defending Europe, European nations could need hundreds of billions of euros annually in extra military spending, plus around 300,000 additional troops just to match Russia's strength. Some European defense officials believe that Russia could also pose a serious military threat in about 3 to 10 years. And without the backing of American forces, European countries might have to rapidly build their own systems for intelligence gathering, satellite communications, and large-scale military logistics, which are areas in which the US has always taken the lead. So in other words, Europe would need to develop a powerful defense framework of its own, which is something that it has never truly done since World War II ended. Also, at the same time, Germany, which is the biggest economy in Europe, is trying to cope up with its own economic problems. It has experienced 5 years of low to no growth and has actually seen negative growth in 2023 and 2024. Now, this might surprise those people who remember when Germany was nicknamed Europe's economic powerhouse. Experts say that several things have come together to hurt Germany's economy. The country has not really been investing enough on infrastructure like roads and digital networks, its population is aging, so the workforce is shrinking, and its manufacturing sector is struggling to meet the demands of a more digital and more environmentally friendly marketplace. And on top of that, Russia has cut gas supplies to Europe, which has hurt the German industry quite badly. Germany has stuck to very strict budget rules during this slump, which has left very little room for strong economic stimulus. Under these rules, which are known as the debt brake, the German federal government can only borrow a tiny percentage of its GDP of about 0.35%. This idea was introduced into Germany's constitution in 2009, partly because Germans have a deep fear of a runaway debt. Many people remember how hyperinflation in the 1920s weakened their society and also contributed to the rise of the Nazis. And since then, Germany has often been proud of its disciplined approach to public finances, captured by phrases like the Black Zero, which refers to the balanced budget. But that said, Merz and potential coalition partners from Social Democrats recently proposed a huge policy shift to ease these debt restrictions. They want to exempt military spending above 1% of GDP from the debt brake completely, which means that there would be no upper limit for that spending, and that they also plan to set up a 500 billion euro fund for infrastructure. Now, this is a massive amount equal to over 10% of Germany's GDP. And the hope here is that it will jolt the economy back into life while also making it possible for Germany to take responsibility for more of Europe's defense. Now, this is shocking because Merz and his party had promised that they would never change the debt brake. But now they have done a complete turnaround to this, probably because of the pressure of dealing with Germany's stalled economy, growing security concerns about Russia, and a feeling of uncertainty about the US under Trump's leadership have forced them to look for drastic solutions. Now, the thing is, passing these reforms will definitely not be simple. In order to amend Germany's constitution, the government needs a two-thirds majority in the parliament. But right now, Merz's Conservative Alliance and the Social Democrats do not have enough votes on their own, which means they must bring in other parties like the Greens or the Free Democrats on board. Some politicians within Merz's own group are calling the plans the worst thing possible, showing how heated this debate has become. Meanwhile, the pressure is even greater because a newly elected Germany's parliament is set to meet very soon. If these reforms are not passed before the new members take their seats, the increase in anti-establishment lawmakers could stop Merz from winning the two-thirds majority that he needs right now. Financial markets, however, have reacted very strongly to the idea of Germany finally loosening its purse strings. The main German stock index, called the DAX, jumped by over 3% when the news broke, nearly reaching a record high. The euro rose by about 4% against the dollar in just 3 days, which is the steepest climb since 2015 because investors believe that this move could stimulate Europe's economy. Yields on German government bonds also went up because investors recalculated how much the government would have to borrow. Stocks of European defense companies climbed by double digits in a single day, and banks also saw gains on hopes that more government spending might speed up economic growth. So looking at the bigger picture here, Europe now stands at what you might call a fork in the road. Since the end of the World War II, Europe has largely organized its security around American guarantees. NATO, which was created in 1949, is built on the idea that if one member is attacked, every other member, including the US, would come to help them. But with Trump now showing reluctance to support old alliances and with concerns that future American presidents might feel the same way as him, Europe was wondering if it should rely on itself from now on. Many officials also believe that Europe must create real strategic autonomy, meaning that it can defend itself and also maintain strong economies and stable trade relationships without really depending on the US at every turn. By the way, if that was not even enough, Europe faces some other challenges as well. Russia remains aggressive in Ukraine. China is considered a systemic rival to Europe on multiple fronts, including technology and trade. And Europe's own economies have not at all bounced back quickly, and the far right is rising in several countries. But Germany's turn on debt and defense might be a way to handle all these challenges all at once. Spend enough to give the economy a real lift and show that Europe can stand up to security threats on its own. But that said, it is still very unclear whether all of these ideas will survive the political battles in Germany. Even if they do, there is a long road ahead before Europe can really match the capabilities that the US has built over many decades now. European governments would need to expand their intelligence services, satellites, and air defenses, and also possibly create many new army brigades with modern equipment to be fully ready for any crisis involving Russia or other threats. So the next few weeks will be very crucial. If Merz's reforms pass, Germany will commit to spending enormous sums on both defense and infrastructure, breaking its own strict rules of the past. And this could set the tone for a new era in Europe where Germany takes the lead in building a more self-reliant continent. But if these plans end up failing, Germany actually might remain stuck economically, and the whole idea of Europe taking care of its own security could suffer a serious blow. Either way, the debate in Germany is likely to shape the direction that Europe takes for many years to come. That brings us to the end of the two stories of the day. With that, let's move on to the final section and talk about the quick news headlines. First, Ola Electric has secured 73.74 crore rupees in incentives under the PLI scheme for automotive and auto components based on its determined sales value for FY 2023-2024, making it the first two-wheeler EV manufacturer in India to receive this benefit. Second, India's central bank RBI is set to tighten underwriting standards for gold loans as the segment has grown 50% since September 2024, significantly outpacing overall loan growth. The RBI's audits over the last 12 to 16 months have revealed irregularities, including fintech agents handling gold collection and lenders auctioning gold without informing defaulters. Third and the final one for the day, Blackstone Incorporated and India's Sattva Group have filed a draft prospectus for Knowledge Reality Trust, where they are planning to raise up to 6,200 crore rupees in what would be India's largest real estate investment trust or REIT IPO. Blackstone holds a 55% stake while Sattva owns 45%. This listing is expected to improve the liquidity in the REITs market and also attract institutional investors into it. That's all the news and stories I have for you today. I hope you found this episode valuable. This is your host Anurag Bansal signing off. I'll see you in the next one. Take care and goodbye. Disclaimer: this content is for informational purposes only. None of the stocks, brands, or products mentioned are recommendations or endorsements.